Another edition of Riding Home. Some of us in a undisclosed location near the in-laws. Ryan, Kirby Smart saying today that a couple of different things. Actually, I don't know where you really want to start, but got Scott Cochran back. It's looking like JT Daniels is starting to progress more and more. Um, it's looking like there's going to be some receivers who are progressing now. He correct me if I'm wrong. He did not rule George out? Certainly didn't say he was in for
No,
Florida.
as far as George Pickens goes, it's his words were that we have a plan for him.
Right, a
So it
long-term
kind of
plan.
sounds like they have a target date in mind. I don't obviously we don't know what that is, but that's what it sounds like to me is that they have a target game that they
It
want him
doesn't seem
back.
like it's
It
Florida.
doesn't it doesn't sound like it was Florida.
Right.
If I
Not
had to
now.
guess, if I had to guess, it's going to be Tech or the championship game.
Well, George Pickens returning to Mark Rick Field at Bobby Dodd Stadium would be a fascinating date to return to because, of course, that was where he showed how immature he was a couple
Hmm.
of years ago. And when you talk with people behind the scenes or just George comes up, they said there has been growth there. Um, and it's important for George to grow. I mean, there's millions of dollars on the line here for George Pickens as we come into the time where he could or should be drafted. And it's maturity is an important thing. I mean, you see it around the league. If you're not dependable, there that hurts your draft stock. It doesn't hurt your ability to earn in the future necessarily. But right now, if you're George, you really want to maximize your chance to make as much money as possible. And I think he's got to get back on the field. I think JT does too.
Well, I think, I'm not a draft expert. That's not what we are
That's what you're
here.
saying?
But
Are you
yeah, well,
confirming that?
I'm confirming that I don't get paid to analyze the NFL draft. But um, you would think that he has to come back and he has to perform. He doesn't just have to come back, right?
Both of
If he
them.
wants if he wants to be a first or second round pick.
I don't know who we're talking about specifically.
I'm
I
talking
don't think
about George Pickens right now, but I think the same thing goes
I,
for
I
JT.
don't think JT Daniels is right now in the ballpark of being a top 50 NFL draft pick.
No.
So that means to me that well, anyway, that's another discussion for another time. For George, I think it is a very possible scenario. I don't think it's a certainty necessarily for George either. Yes, he's got to come back. Yes, he's got to play. I haven't looked at a lot of the draft stuff lately for excuse me receivers. You've got Wade. There's too many.
I was looking yesterday, and he's still one of the top 10 receivers in the
Well, he
draft. He's
should
not
be.
number 1 or 2 anymore, because he hasn't been
Right.
playing, but I think the
They,
Ohio
they got to
State
get
guys are at the top of that
they have
list.
got to get healthy at receiver, Georgia. I mean, so seasons have a way of there's a flow to the season, and typically we would have already seen Georgia play Tennessee, and you're yet to play Auburn, but um, we are. It's already been a long season. I mean, you're talking about 7 games, two different quarterbacks. You've already played a top five showdown, a top 10 showdown, and two other teams that have been ranked. You still got to play the. I mean, it's been a long year. Can you remember Birmingham? That's how long ago this season has been going on for. So if you're Georgia, you still are not. If you're going to play in the national championship game, which I suspect they probably will, you're still not even at the halfway point of your season. You're just before the halfway point. So there's a lot left to go here, and JT can zoom up draft boards quick. It's not a great year for quarterbacks. George can make a big move. Dominic Blaylock will be coming back. Jermaine Burton will be coming back next season. But those guys need to get rolling too. There's too many injuries on this team right now.
And that's why I think that this is a good place for the bye week, before they go down to Jacksonville. They need it. They need this off week.
I
That was
agree.
3 or 4 really physical games in a row. I don't know if Vanderbilt was the fourth one back, but Arkansas, Auburn, Kentucky, a lot of guys are going to get banged up, and they had to sit guys out. Arian Smith wasn't playing.
Right.
Rosemy wasn't playing. There's a lot of guys out. It's quite ridiculous how good they've been playing with that many receivers not out there on the field.
So
It just shows how loaded they are.
can be.
Can be.
Well, you're saying their depth. This
I
is
think they
not.
are deep. Do you
Oh
not
yeah,
agree?
total. No, I completely think they are.
It's
But I
it's
think
it,
I want to say this because so many people get aggravated when we talk over each other. I mean, there's a delay, and I actually have a red shirt on today, so everyone can rejoice. But
I
this,
wore one last week. I meant to mention it in the video, but
so, but what I suspected would happen with this team coming into the season is not at all what's happened, which is that I thought the offense would be much more explosive than it is currently. But when you take a look at what they are currently, which is a precision team more than an explosion team compared to what they could be, then this team still has room to grow on the points per game average on the offensive side of the ball. The defense has been a little better than I thought it would be. I mean, you're talking about a defense that's giving up 7. How many points are they giving up right now a game? Something like that. I mean, Kentucky
five and
scored.
change.
Okay,
I
so
did the math on. I think it's 5.5.
a little over a nickel, not much. And can that guide you to a national championship? It hasn't in the past, recent past, but all the other times in football that has been the case. Um, I think you're gonna see. I was hoping for the Dogs that they would get everybody back in, the realm of playing by Florida. That's not gonna happen. But I think what you could see is by the time they play Alabama, Auburn, or Ole Miss might be their toughest matchup in the conference championship game. Just be matchup. That could be a different offense. I expect it to be a different offense because I expect at that point to have some receivers back at minimum, and you may have a change at quarterback. You may not, but you'll have different receivers.
Georgia's the only knock against the Georgia defense right now that I'll say is that they haven't played a very explosive offense yet.
Right.
And in
But there's
turn, we haven't had to see Georgia's offense put up a lot of points to win. And so when you're playing a team like Alabama or Ole Miss or maybe
right.
Ohio State or Oklahoma in the playoff, it becomes the point where you definitely want JT Daniels in there. You want these guys back and you want them to be you don't want to just throw them in there then. I mean, these guys need to come back. And it sounds like
Well,
JT's a lot closer than he was last week.
yeah, and Kirby's point is, or I don't know if it's Kirby's or somebody else that I talked to, I can't remember. But their point was kind of, well, it's not like he's not practicing. I mean, he's practicing. And today, Kirby said was it 70 throws or
It was I think it was a number that started I think it was 50 to
six?
70 roughly.
And those were some of those were 40-yard throws. He looked
So it's improving.
well, yeah, and he looked much. I mean, you got basically 2 weeks from today that you're going to play the Gators. He needs to play in that game. Like if he can do what he's doing right now, my suspicion is that he will be much further along in 2 weeks. I mean, that's a long time in football for this type of injury. It seems now. Ron Corson is a very calculated, conservative person. He's not going to just roll these guys out there, and so we talk about the injuries a lot. I would be aggravated if I were Kirby because I don't know how much of this is a fault of anyone, but it's a reality that they're living with. And if they're going to want to win, if they want to win the national championship, they're going to have to get all of the guys out there that they need. And right now they're not there. Could they win it with the team that we saw play on Saturday? I actually think they still could win the national championship. I'm not sure
I
that they would.
I think with the team that's been out there the last couple weeks would still be the favorite to win, but
Yes,
I would be very, very confident if the team we know they can be is out there.
yeah,
I
that's a
would,
good way to put it.
I would have a hard time saying someone is gonna beat that team that we know can be out there.
The team that we know can be out there, this has become a pattern in college football, and it really started. I think it started with the 18 Clemson team. You're talking about an all-time Clemson team, like one of the best in a decade of college football. Then they were surpassed by an all-time LSU team that was one of the best in the century of football in terms of scoring. That might be the best offensive football team we've ever seen in college football history, which was then very possibly surpassed by the best or second best offense of all time with Alabama in 2020. This is not the best offense of all time at Georgia. The University of Georgia, nevertheless, college football. I mean, those Aaron Murray teams in 2012 were flying up and down the field. but this defense could be the best all time in college football. The question is now, Ryan, has college football changed so much that, we've gone from you got to score to you got to defend? I mean, everybody in sports, in politics, in business, they get into the habit of saying, "Hey, this is the way to do it," and people become brainwashed into this is the only way to do it, and that's just not how life works. There's different ways to do different things. I do a lot of tennis analogies. Roger Federer does not at all play the same way that Rafa Nadal does. They're not the same type of player. So um, you don't have to be Alabama 2020 or LSU 2019. They don't have that style of quarterback necessarily. They do the Bama. They don't have Joe Burrow. So and they don't have those receivers. So that's my thing is that would they still be favored as it currently constructed with injured receivers with Stetson as your quarterback? Would they still be favored? Yeah, they would. What they would be better with, or certainly with the return of George and some of these other receivers. We've not seen Dominique Blaylock at all this season. We've barely seen Kyrus Jackson play receiver. I mean, this receiving group has been dominated lately by the tight ends. And Brock Bowers, to conclude my monologue, has become one of the best offensive players in college football.
It's it's a bunch of what ifs. It's been a
Yeah.
lot of what ifs all year. Going into the season, we all talked about, at least talked about this Georgia team as being someone that could be as explosive as the last couple of years. I think there
Oh
was
yeah.
a lot of people saw that potential. People were comparing it. Can they be as explosive as the LSU 2019 team? I don't know if anyone ever will be, but it turns out that the defense is what's taken them so far, and that the offense has just been doing its job. But if they can get even just JT and Pickens back before the end of the season, I think the offense can skyrocket. I mean,
That's a totally different situation. I mean,
it's.
George
I
Pickens.
mean, it doesn't. I don't even think all of them have to come back. If you just have JT and Pickens come back, that changes the game because they're so deep.
One more thing. I'm sorry, Ron. We came in. We have seen over the last certainly half decade. I'd say maybe decade. We we we've seen. You start at the beginning of the decade with Cam. Yeah, Johnny Manziel, Aaron Murray, people like that. And then there was a little brief window there where you didn't have unbelievable quarterback play with Blake Sims and guys like that. But then you got to Deshaun, and you had soon after that you had Trevor, and after Trevor, Joe Burrow, and then last year with Mac Jones. Do you remember when Clemson was going to win 45 games in a row? Me too. We are no longer at a point in college football where it's the year of the quarterback. Think about how bad quarterback has been this year compared to its friends in the recent past. Alabama has been solid, I would say, at quarterback. Ohio State's been solid. It's not been solid enough to prevent those guys from losing. Oklahoma, you got a guy who came into the season as this Heisman frontrunner who is now the second string quarterback. JT Daniels has played fewer, he started fewer games than Stetson Bennett. DJ Uiagalelei, just not good, period, right now. So, sort of the three of the quarterbacks that we thought would be spotlighted, DJ's just not been good. JT's been banged up, and Spencer Rattler's been benched. So what we knew about college football is gone. And that's the other thing, Ryan. Things can change in seasons, and we're only at the halfway point. Oklahoma could be ascending. They've got a major change that they've had happen. Can we say that about Ohio State? I don't know. The Big Ten East is the most curious thing to watch these next 4 weeks. Georgia is probably going to go down to Jacksonville and punch the snout in on the Gators. The week after that, it will not be pretty what they do to Missouri. I'll be curious to see the Tennessee game and then Charleston Southern and Tech. So these next 5 games are not super, super challenging for Georgia. But that Big Ten East is not going to be fun. That's going to be like playing in the SEC. And watching those guys, that will be a better barometer of what Georgia has to deal with to win it all.
You know, you're right about the quarterback thing. We were expecting a few of these guys to possibly have elite seasons, and it's just been completely different.
Yeah.
And another guy, Sam Howell, I think a lot of people
Yeah.
expected to have a great season, not having a very good season.
I can't get that
Cincinnati's
guy.
quarterback is solid. He's very
Well,
good.
Ritter's been good for a while, but I don't know that he's
Yeah.
on the level of passing playmaker that these other guys are.
Mm.
Whenever anybody mentions Sam Howell, I can't get the TikTok guy out of my head. That guy's world
Oh,
famous.
the North Carolina
Yeah,
Pledge Talk.
yeah. Pledge
Briggs
talk,
is his
exactly.
name.
Briggs. One other thing here. Scott Cochran returns, but it doesn't sound like he's going to be quote on the field
No.
um, for the time being. He's returned from. I don't want to misspeak, but it seems like he went to rehab. Not rehab, but he went away to get some help. I shouldn't even have said rehab, but getting him back is certainly big news, and I wish him well. It's tough. It can be tough out there for sure. But this Georgia team keeps churning on. Any other notes today from Kirby? He seemed relaxed today, which is abnormal.
Yeah. Well, it's
What's
the
that
off week,
about?
so maybe he's chilled out a little bit. Uh,
I don't
he's
know.
happy he gets to recruit this weekend.
Yeah, and I was the one
He
that
gets to
asked
do what
him.
he loves.
I was the one that asked him about the recruiting at the end and the marketing at the beginning. I mean, you had. I mean, is it? It's kind of hard to believe, but it is true that Georgia and Kentucky had a larger audience than Texas and Oklahoma. I mean, that is
That's
crazy.
wild. That's
Well, it speaks to the power of Georgia, but of the league too, and the package they've had for decades with CBS. That's going away, but now you're going to see these triple and quadruple headers on some of these Saturdays that will start. Think about this next year, Ryan. You're going to have a Saturday in the fall where you're going to have Texas OU at noon, Georgia Auburn at 3:30 or 4, and then Texas A&M Bama. Is that? Yeah, it would be those three games. I mean, you would roll through 5 to 6 million people for each of those games, and you just can't get audiences like that anymore on broadcast television or anywhere really. So
Are
it's
you
going
talking
to
about what
be.
ESPN and ABC's audience is going to be?
I said next year. That was the wrong way to
Yeah,
put it.
that's
Yeah,
that's
sorry
why I
about
was.
that. Yeah, no. Well, we don't think it will be next year. I don't think CBS is going to give up that quick. But that is the future. In a couple of years, you will see, Red River rivalry, South Deep South Soldiers rivalry, and then Texas A&M Alabama, and that is going to be like the best weekend of college football ever. And Georgia Auburn could be at night. You never know. That's
Yeah, they
that's
could
going to
flip
be.
it around. I mean,
I
they're
don't
going to
think
have a
you.
lot more leeway with times and
Oh,
things like that
completely.
versus
Yeah.
that locked in 3:30
That's
CBS.
as Don Draper would say, that's what the money's for. All right, listen, go to dogpost.com. We'll see you on the website. Thanks for watching.